feel like I'm in like a news studio, and thank you for joining me. Let's do this. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, YouTube. Today I thought I would talk about something which I think is kind of affecting all of us in different ways at the moment, in some way or another, and that is really simply habits. Obviously, in particular, I think I'd like to talk about bad habits, but just habits in general as well. Now, research shows that it takes, on average, 66 days for any person to form a habit. And habits are all a part of our lives. In fact, it turns out that our brains actually form habits intentionally in order to make our lives a little bit easier for us. When we first try a new task, something that we've never tried before, our brains have to work quite hard at it. Granted, some of your brains might have to work harder than others. Our brains have to process loads of new information as they start to try and work out the task that you're trying to achieve. But as soon as our brains work out how that task works, the action starts to become automatic and the process in our brains start to take a lot less mental energy to complete. In other words, the mental activity required to do the task decreases dramatically. Think about how much conscious concentration you had to put in the first time you reverse parked, or even the first time you had to tie your own shoelaces. Then really simply compare that to the amount of mental effort you use to do that task now. Although in all fairness, I'm sure for the parking example, it's probably the same for a lot of you. Even take your morning routine as an example. From the moment you wake up till the moment you leave to work, there's a good chance that whole routine's pretty much the same every single morning. You probably get up at the same time. You probably have breakfast and get showered and changed and brush your teeth all in the same order and at the same time. Most of that process will become a habit. It's kind of why we call it a routine. Really simply, after 66 days, it becomes subconscious and our brain just puts us on autopilot. Habits are a really clever adaptive feature of how our brains work. Now, unfortunately for us, this feature of our brains that helps us so much day to day can often backfire and can result in us learning habits that hinder us rather than helping us. Bad habits are just as easy to pick up as good ones, and as a result, most of us have picked up our fair share of bad habits over the years. But you will be pleased to hear that all is not lost. There is plenty of things that we can do in order to try and kick those pesky bad habits out. Now, in today's video, I'm going to share with you 3 ways that you can start to kick your bad habits. These are all based in psychology, in science, and all have some real backing to them. But I think it kind of goes without saying that before you start to kick your own bad habits, you kind of have to realize that they're there. The first step before you do any of these 3 tips is honestly just recognizing that you have bad habits. Not only that, and I think it maybe at first seems obvious, but you also have to be open to breaking them. Rather than doing just what most people do when they have a bad habit, deny it at all costs. You just have to be really open-minded about the fact that actually a habit might be having a negative effect on you, rather than just dismissing them to the side for now. For me, I bite my nails. Now, I've always bitten my nails as long as I can remember since I was a kid, and I'm not gonna lie, I have tried to give it up at least a few times over the years. Now, an excuse I used for a long time to not bother giving up biting my nails was that it didn't really affect anyone other than me, and actually I used to say that it didn't really affect my life either. When the truth of the matter is that it does affect me. It does affect my life, and probably in more ways than one. Actually, my nail biting has been really bad at the moment. I think it's to do with all this being cooped up inside, and also I tend to do it a little bit more when I'm stressed or worried or anxious, and obviously there's quite a lot of that going on at the moment. Oh my god, yeah, they are really bad at the moment. Oh my god. It's not till you actually look at it that you realise how bad it actually is. Anyway, now quite a lot of the psychological theory that I'm going to take you through today comes from a guy called Elliot Berkman. Elliot is a psychologist that does his research at the University of Oregon and has done loads of research into the science and psychology behind bad habits, and in particular, how to break them. Elliot Berkman says that since habits take practice and a repetition to form, the same is true when it comes to breaking them. In order to eliminate those pesky habits, whatever they may be, start with these strategies. Strategy number 1 is really simply just to calm down. There is a plethora, great word by the way, of neuroscientists that backs up the idea that we do our best thinking when we are happy, relaxed, and confident. Now, if we do our best thinking when we're happy, relaxed, and confident, that means we can put the most conscious effort and mental effort into trying to break our bad habits. In neuroscientist Dr. Paul MacLean's triune model of the brain, he explains that when we're a little bit stressed out, when we're not as confident, we're not happy, and we're not relaxed, a paralytic hormone called cortisol floods into our neocortex. Now, our neocortex is that part of the brain that really does the best thinking, that creative, problem-solving kind of thinking that we just talked about there. Once this hormone has effectively paralyzed our higher order thinking, it gets sent down to our more instinctive ways of thinking. In really simple terms, this kind of explains why we revert back to bad habits when we're stressed. When you're stressed, you might bite your nails or eat ice cream till you're sick, or do something else that you know you shouldn't be doing, because that conscious part of your brain that usually stops and tells you that you shouldn't be doing them has been physically paralyzed. It's been actually shut down. So I guess the first step in breaking a bad habit is to understand that and to try and stay as happy and relaxed and confident as you possibly can. Now, obviously, it kind of goes without saying that there's no one secret potion or solution to this, because we all face different stresses in our totally, vastly different lives. But honestly, just find out what works for you. And also, if you're maybe just not in a place at the moment where you're that happy, relaxed, or confident, then it's probably not the right time to start tackling your bad habits. You probably have to work on other areas of your life and maybe come back to the habits a little bit later on. Technique number 2 is recognizing your habit loops. Charles Duhigg, the award-winning author, shared his habit loop concept in his best-selling book, The Power of Habits. He explained that... In fact, you know what? The best way to explain this is getting the paper out again. Bear with me 2 seconds. He explained that all habits consist of 3 parts: a cue, a routine, and a reward. He describes the cue as a trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode and which habit to use. Then there is a routine. Now, this is usually the habit itself, but he describes it as something which can be physical, mental, or emotional. Finally, you have the reward, which, according to Duhigg, helps your brain figure out if this particular loop is worth remembering for the future. He says that over time, this loop becomes more and more automatic. The cue and the reward become intertwined until a powerful sense of anticipation and even craving emerges. So again, in really basic terms, if your brain deems the reward worthwhile, it begins to associate that cue or that trigger with that reward, and it just wants it more. It then really simply puts 2 and 2 together, and it realizes that in order to get that reward, it needs to complete the routine, or in our case, it needs to just do that habit. If we can take Duhigg's principle of cue, routine, and reward, and we can learn to recognize our loops effectively, then we can pluck the unhealthy routine from the middle of the process and just replace it with one that's much more helpful. Let's take an example. Say, for example, at the end of the week, you often decide to go out with co-workers and have a few drinks. If we try to identify the reward here, you'll actually find 2. Firstly, there's just the really simple socialization aspect, and then secondly, there's the relaxing effects that alcohol has on your system, otherwise known as getting drunk. Now, in this loop, both of those rewards are both valid and necessary. So if you remove this routine from your life, if you just get rid of the habit of going out for drinks and replace it with nothing else, then the reward in your life decreases. Now, the trick here is to keep the cue in place, which in this case is being tired at the end of a long week, while also keeping the reward in place, which in this case is the social time and the relaxation, but change the routine that yields them. Pluck that habit out of the center. So to just suggest an alternative for this example, you could try and convince a co-worker to start exercising with you after work. Do something like running, yoga, rock climbing, it doesn't really matter. You then have a healthy routine or a healthy habit that replaces that negative habit while yielding the exact same reward. Now, this is such a powerful piece of psychology that really you can apply it to anything. In fact, why not go and try and identify one of your habit loops now? Try and pluck the habit from the center of it and see what you could replace it with. And our third tip, our third technique for getting over bad habits is just really simply to have a good motivation for breaking that bad habit. Now, don't worry, this one is a little bit simpler than the last one to get your head around. All you have to do for this one is just make sure that your motivation for breaking that habit is both suitable and genuine. Honestly, this is the one that I really struggle with biting my nails. You need to make sure it's something you genuinely care about and you're not just trying to break the habit for the sake of it. And the advice here, if you don't genuinely care, is just to make yourself. Give yourself a good reason to care. This is also the reason why pleasure-based habits are harder to break. It's because our brains release another hormone, a pleasure hormone called dopamine, when it experiences some positive behavior. The release of dopamine during a habit can make habits considerably more difficult to break. Your brain starts to literally get addicted to this dopamine, to this rush, and over time, the more this happens, your brain reinforces this habit as a positive thing. A great example here is if you are wanting to replace eating junk food with just eating loads of healthy fruit and veg. Ultimately, your brain knows that that's not the same fatty, sugary, salty snack that it's had before, and therefore it won't produce the same dopamine and by extension the same feeling that eating the alternative in junk food would. And this is where the importance of having a real and genuine motivation comes into play. Elliot Berkman says that intellectually, we know that quitting smoking is good for our health, and limiting how many burgers we eat might help us lose weight. But rooting habit changes in specific and personal reasons, giving up smoking for good may mean spending more years with your family, or eating healthier may give you more energy for those outdoor adventures you used to enjoy, provides a way stronger dose of motivation. Now, we all know that bad habits are really hard to break, and they're fairly easy to form over time. But my hope is by giving you some of the science, some of the psychology behind this, some of you will now be able to go and apply some of this to your life and really start to kick those bad habits in the teeth. I personally am going to give this a go over the next few weeks while we've got all the spare time as well. I'm going to start to put some of these into play, and I'm hoping that I can come back in a few weeks with some better news about my nail biting issue. It has got really, really bad at the moment, way worse than it usually is. So this is my motivation for really getting it done. That is it for this week. If you did enjoy that, if you got anything out of that, or if you're going to apply that to any of the habits that you maybe have at the moment, stick a comment down below. Be sure to give the video a little thumbs up. It really does help me out. And again, as always, if you do enjoy this kind of content, do consider subscribing to my channel. Otherwise, I will see you next time.